Hello everybody, my name is Oscar. I'm the teacher of ICT in senior 6 classes. We are still at unit number 1, which is database design, but today's lesson is what we call ERD or entity relationship diagram. So after this lesson, you should be able to identify all the symbols which are used in the entity relationship diagram, and you should be also able to draw the entity relationship diagram for each given problem. So what is the meaning of ERD in full words? So E stands for entity, R stands for relationship, and D stands for diagram. So the meaning of ERD in full words is entity relationship diagram. So let us first of all discuss about some key concepts that will be used during the creation of ERD. So what is an entity? So as unit name suggests, database design. So in database design we discuss about different database levels, like a conceptual level or logical level. So at the conceptual level, we think about the definition of a database and its objects, and the database objects at this level are referred to entities. So an entity is a real world object which is distinguishable from other objects on the world. So this means that any object on which a company or enterprise should store information about it will be called an entity. So an entity can be a person, an entity can be a place, an entity can be an event, etc. So here we have some examples like a university course, like job, you know that there are so many types of jobs, and so on. So entity refers to any item about which data should be captured and stored. So an entity has characteristics, or just we should say properties or attributes. So an attribute or attributes are the properties or the characteristics that describe an entity. So let us take an example. We have an entity which is called student. So what are the characteristics of a student or attributes of a student? So there are many properties of entity called students, but here we have mentioned roll number or ID number, student name, which should be first name, last name, branch or just a department, age, sex, and so on. So now, what is an entity? What is an entity relationship diagram? So it's a flowchart. It's a graphical representation of entities and their relationships. So within ERD, we must have entities in a given entity set. By definition, an entity set refers to the collection or a set of many entities, and also relationship among those entities. So we say that an entity relationship diagram is a flowchart that illustrates how entities such as people, objects, concepts, and so on relate to each other within a system. So an entity relationship is like a graphical representation of entities and their relationships. So what is a relationship? In a database management system or relational database management system, it is possible to create a relationship between two or more entities or relations once some entities have identifier or attributes key, like primary keys, and the others have foreign keys. So a relationship is like an association among the entities. So it's the way in which two or more data sets, entities, tables, relations, depending on database level, you are into consideration. So we can say that a relationship is an association between two or more entities, or just we can say that a relationship in DBMS or in RDBMS is an association or just a link among tables where some tables have primary keys and the others have foreign keys. So now let's discuss about ERD symbols or entity relationship diagram symbols. So in computer science, specifically in the study of databases, remember that a database is a collection of information which is stored so that it is easy to access, to modify, to maintain, and so on. So we first of all discuss about entity symbols, or just the symbols which are used to represent the different types of entities. So we have too many types of entities in the study of databases that we are going to discuss right now. So we have strong entity, and weak entity. So strong, here we have weak. So what is a strong entity? A strong entity is an entity which is independent of others within the entity set. This means that a strong entity has always its own characteristics and key attributes to distinguish it from the rest. Whenever a weak entity is the entity which is depending to other entities, so it does not have its own properties to identify, to uniquely identify it with other entities. Let us see the symbols for strong entity and weak entity right now. So a strong entity or simply entity is represented by a rectangle. Whenever a weak entity is represented by this symbol, it's like an association of two rectangles where we have inner and outer rectangle. So a strong entity type does not depend to any other entity, whenever a weak entity depends on strong entities. So strong entities have key attributes, or just the properties or the attributes which uniquely identified with others within the entity set, whenever weak entity does not have a key attribute. Now, let us discuss about relationship symbols. Remember that a relationship is an association among the entities, or just is a link between two relations where one of the two has primary key and the second has the foreign key. In other words, one table or relation references to another one. So relationships are used to document the interaction between two entities. So relationships are usually verbs such as assign, associate, teach, track, and so on. So here we have some ERD symbols which are used to depict or to show the relationship among the entities. So the first figure is a diamond or a rhombus. This is a strong relationship, or just a relationship which is an association among entities. So on the second figure, we have a set of two diamonds or rhombuses, which is used to represent a weak relationship. So weak relationships are a connection between a weak entity and its owner. Let's discuss about ERD attributes, symbols, or properties symbols. So attributes, as I have told you, are the characteristics of an entity or simply attributes of a table or a relation when we focus on logical database level. So that help the users to understand the meaning of a database. So here we have different types of symbols which are used to denote attributes. So here we have an oval shape or an ellipse. So this is the symbol which is used to represent an attribute in the entity relationship diagram. So we have many types of relationships that we'll discuss about later, like a one-to-one relationship, one-to-many relationship, many-to-many relationship, and many-to-one relationship. We'll discuss about them later. And we have also many types of attributes. For example, we have an attribute which can be assigned many values, because during the study of a database, a property must have the specific value. So if a property or an attribute can be given more than one values, it is referred as a multi-valued attribute. Here, the prefix multi means many. So it's a kind of an attribute which can take distinct values. So there are also many types of attributes. That is the reason why we continue to give different symbols. For example, there is what we call a derived attribute, which is represented by this symbol. So a derived attribute is attributes whose value can be calculated from a related attribute value. So it's a kind of an attribute which can give other attributes. So here we have also another symbol which is used to represent a composite attribute. For example, if we say an attribute which is called the name, so we have different types of names. We should have first name, last name, nickname, first name, family names. So an attribute which is formed by many sub-attributes is called a composite attribute. So during the representation of entity relationship diagram, composite attribute is always represented by this symbol. So we can summarize ERD symbols by using this table. We have 3 columns. We have the first column, we have the second column, we have the third column, and here we have an entity set, which means the set of entities, because during the study of databases we should see or discover or find out many entities, remembering that an entity is an object to which you can collect and store information about it. So strong entity or simple entity is represented by rectangle. Weak entity set is represented by these symbols. We have an inner and the outer rectangle. So attributes generally are represented by ellipse, but as I have told you, we have different types of attributes. Simple attribute or simple attribute is represented by ellipse. Whenever a composite attribute, we have ellipse where we have other ellipses which are connected to it. We have multi-valued attributes. We have 2 ellipses associated. We have derived attribute, which is represented by an ellipse composed by dot lines. Null attribute and single valued attribute do not have their corresponding ERD symbols. We have relationship, which can be categorized into two categories. Strong relationship, so here we have a rhombus, and a weak relationship, where we have a association or a set of inner and outer diamonds or rhombuses. So let us try this application activity in order to see if you have got something from my presentation. So you are given an entity relationship diagram. Observe it carefully and then answer to the question after it. So the first question, after observing this entity relationship diagram, you are going to identify entities and their properties. In other words, you must be aware of the figures which are used to represent entities, so that you can mention the entities, and also the geometric figures which are used to represent attributes or just properties. The second question, you are going to identify the relationships. So you must be aware of the figures or the symbols which are used to represent relationships. So if there are some symbols to represent the relationship, you are going to mention relationship names. And also, you list identifiers or key attributes if they exist from this ERD we have here. So here there are some answers. We have two entities which are customers and sales, because we have only two rectangles from our entity relationship diagram. And also on an entity called the customer, we have three ellipses or three oval shapes. So it means that we have the following attributes or properties. We have customer ID, we have customer name, and we have status. So on an entity called the sales, we have three oval shapes. This means that we have a sale number property, we have customer ID property, and we have price to pay property. So the second question, you identify relationships. As we have only one rhombus figure or one diamond figure, so the name of a relationship from our entity, from the given entity relationship diagram is called the order. So it's a verb, as I have told you. We use the verbs to denote the relationships. And also key attributes are the following: customer ID and sales number. So these are the attributes which are used to uniquely identify a given entity from other entities in the same entity set. So to identify them, you look at or you consider only underlined attributes. So from our question, we have customer ID, which is underlined, and sale number, which is underlined. Thank you for watching my video. This is the end of my video, but don't forget to subscribe in order to get new videos, like, share, and comments. See you next time.